and abundance, okay? So this is the type of place that Jesus was going to be born, right? A place of fruitfulness, abundance, and the house of bread, okay? Now, the thing with it, though, when he says you are small among the clans of Judah, we know Bethlehem is a good place now because of what happened there. But then it was insignificant. The only thing that was great that happened there was the birth of David, right? And he was the greatest king there, but that was it, right? Bethlehem was nothing. It was insignificant. And guys, this is a lesson to us, or should be a lesson to us, that God specializes in the insignificant. He specializes in the small, right? So if ever we feel that we're not good enough or worthy enough or we're insignificant, then we're in the right place, right, to be used by God. Because Bethlehem was insignificant too until God put his hand on it, right? And the same is true of us, right? Sometimes we know we're not worthy. We know we're insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but once God puts his hand on us, all of that can change, okay? So please be encouraged if you do feel that way. And so, he says that one is going to come to be a ruler over Israel for me. And, he's going to come from antiquity. Oh, hold on. Oh, yes, he's going to come from antiquity, from ancient times. So, guys, it lets us know right here that even though he's going to come out of Bethlehem, that's not where he started, right? We know that he started from the beginning, right? That's why it talks about his origin is from antiquity. It's saying he's going to be born here, but this is not where he came from. And it's important for us to remember where he comes from because that paints the picture of who he is, right? When it talks about coming from antiquity, it teaches us 4 things about Christ. The first thing is it teaches us about his glory, right? He's more than a man. That already means he's great, right? He's a great leader because Muhammad, he was a man. Buddha, he was a man. Jesus was not. Right? He was not. Thank you, Jesus. So it teaches us about his glory. Secondly, it teaches us about his love for us, right? The fact that he loved us so much that he voluntarily gave up glory or came out of glory just to be here with us. And then it teaches us about his nature, right? His humility, the fact that he voluntarily added humanity to his deity. Right? And then lastly, it teaches us that he's empathetic, right? Now, we know it's a difference between sympathetic and empathetic. If he was sympathetic, he would have just felt sorry for us because we was crazy and on our way to hell. But the fact that he was empathetic and he literally put himself in flesh to put himself in our place, right? To live our life and to feel our pain and to show us how to overcome it all, right? So all of these things, it teaches us that because he was there from the beginning, all of these things are important to speak about who he is. Verse 3, and this is still part of Micah's prophecy. He says, therefore, Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor has given birth. Then the rest of the ruler's brothers will return to the people of Israel. So, guys, from the time that Micah gave this prophecy to the time of Jesus' birth, it was over 700 years, okay? But he still gave it anyway. But again, guys, this shows that there's no expiration date on the promises of God. Thank God for that. All of these years that have passed, and still the promise was fulfilled. And so when it talks about Israel being abandoned until that time, so Israel, they, like I said, they were crazy, okay? And because of their sin and rebelliousness, they were held captive by the Babylonians, okay, around this time. And so the good news is that it was only temporary, right? Micah, even though he was giving them this judgment, he was also letting them know it's only temporary, right? Because you're going to come out of it. So twice he was talking about restoration. Because one, when he talks about the brothers, the ruler's brothers will return, that's talking about them coming out of captivity, right? So that's restoration part 1. Restoration part 2 that we know is that when Christ came, he was able to restore us all, right? All of us who wanted to follow him. And guys, the good news here and the lesson for us is that even though God has to punish us for our sin and sometimes our rebelliousness, it's only temporary, right? It's only temporary if we choose to follow him and continue to follow him, right? Because he's a just God, he has to punish us because he loves us. But the good news, the shouting news, is that he always has a plan for restoration. Even while we are planning to mess up and to sin against him, he's planning on a way for us to always return to him, right? We planning to sin, and he's saying, I love them so much even though they planning to mess up. I'm planning for a way that they will always be able to come back to me. And so here it is. Micah talks about the restoration of them from the Babylonian captivity, and then the restoration for us all. Okay, and then verse 4. Now it's talking about who Jesus is going to be, right? He don't even know him. Right, 700 years before him, and he's talking about who he's going to be. He says he will stand and shepherd them in the strength of the Lord, in the majestic name of the Lord his God. They will live securely, or then his greatness will extend to the ends of the earth. Right, guys, when it says he will stand, it's saying that he's going to assume the role of king. Right, he's not going to be a passive king. We're going to know he king. And then when it says he's a shepherd, I love that word. Now, especially back then, when you thought about a ruler, you didn't think about a shepherd, right? It almost seemed like on opposite ends. Because when you think of a ruler, you think of someone mighty. You think of someone that is in a palace and ruling over many, right? But when you think of a shepherd, you think of somebody that's only over lowly creatures, right? That's over sheep, dumb sheep. Right? So you don't necessarily think of ruler when you think of shepherd. But this is the majestic part about God, that he is a shepherd, but he's also a ruler, right? So when it talks about him being a shepherd, it talks about him being humble, or to deal with lowly sheep with care and love and compassion, okay? When you thought about rulers back in those days, those were probably not words you would use to describe many of them, right? But to say that he was a shepherd, or he would shepherd us, it also talked about this patience, care, and compassion. And when it says that he's going to do it in the strength of the Lord, guys, that's talking about all the power that he's going to have as our ruler, okay? Because many great kings with the best intentions failed, but God won't. And that's why it says he's going to rule in the strength of the Lord. God's strength won't fail. So Micah is prophesying right here, we're going to have a leader, a ruler who cannot fail, because he's going to be operating in the strength of God, right? And then when it says that he's going to rule in the majestic name of the Lord his God, it's talking about this special relationship, because it says his God, right? It's talking about Jesus's. It's talking about this special relationship that he's going to have with God, and all of his strength, majesty, and power is going to come from God, right? And then when it talks about they will live securely, it's talking about the people, his followers. It's saying that they're going to abide in him or follow him because of his greatness, right? His greatness is going to extend to the ends of the world. And this is one of the reasons that his people will follow him. And then verse 5, this is one of the best parts to me. It says, he will be their peace. He will be their peace. Now, remember, he's talking to Judah, who is used to crazy rulers, okay? And most of them could not be described as peaceful. I don't know if any of them could be, right? Because as great as a king as David was, he'll kill his enemies in a second. So peaceful, I don't think could be used to describe him, but he's saying he will be their peace. Guys, this is good news for them, and it's better news for us, right? Because he just told them, y'all finna go into captivity. Y'all finna be messed up for a time, right? But you got a ruler that's coming that's gonna be your peace. And guys, we might not necessarily be in captivity by a foreign enemy, but we got a lot of stuff going on. The news is scary. COVID is scary. And as scary as COVID is, gun violence and all these other things that we have to deal with is scary. But we have peace because we have Jesus. That's good news. We got peace because we have Jesus. It didn't say that he was going to bring peace. It said that he is peace. That's important to remember, right? Because people could bring peace. We could bring peace to each other, but we can't be described as peace or defined as peace. This lets us know that we have to have Christ if we want peace. In the midst of whatever we're going through, especially in today's times, we can have peace only if we have Jesus, okay? And so then this next part teaches us that Jesus was sought as king. So then it fast forwards to Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. And it's talking, a little bit about the birth of Christ. We know that Luke mostly wrote a detailed description about the birth, but Matthew, he kind of wrote about the surrounding things around Jesus's birth. So he was sought as king. Matthew 2:1 says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem. Okay, so guys, some of this is familiar, but let's dive into it. So wise men, these were Middle Eastern men who studied stars, and it usually was to predict the future, interpret dreams, and usually they were advisors to the king. Okay, and some descriptions will see the word magi used. Right, that's where we get our English word magic, right? Because sometimes that's what they were thought to be, like magicians, right? Because they could predict things. I mean, really, they were like probably modern day astrologers, right? Looking at the stars to read things. But back then it was like magic because most of the other people didn't know what those things meant. So these wise men, it doesn't say much about them, only that they came from the east, right? And we know that they came to worship the king. So they come from the east, and it says they arrive in Jerusalem. Now, remember, Jerusalem was the capital, okay? And so Jerusalem, remember, we already talked about Bethlehem. It was nothing special or significant about Bethlehem, but it was with Jerusalem because that was the capital. That's where everyone would come. And so even the wise men who saw that Jesus' birth was coming, they saw the star, they didn't even arrive in the right place. They went to Jerusalem because they felt that surely a Jewish king will be born in the capital. All right. Because that's what a greatness is, right? And they did not even know that he was in Bethlehem 5 or 6 miles away. And so, guys, again, this reminds us that even if we come from a place that we feel is insignificant or lowly, because God has his hand on it, greatness can still come from it. Right? It don't matter if we from Chicago, right? When you say you from Chicago and different meetings and stuff, they look at you side-eyed. I know, maybe we don't know that, but they do. They like, what? You survived the gun violence? They think you dodging bullets every day and stuff like that. So they don't think much of you. And here it is, the King of Kings is born in Bethlehem, not Jerusalem, right? And guys, this is also a lesson that God knows how to keep our haters away, especially until we can deal with them. Now, here it is. God could not have Christ be born in Jerusalem because he knew that Herod was going to try to kill him. Right? So he put him just close enough, but far enough that Herod couldn't get to him. Right? Guys, if you're questioning in your life right now, why are you in the place that you're in? And it ain't because, now I ain't talking about the people who you put yourself in that place, because you know why you there, okay? But I'm saying you know that God has put you in a place. It might be your job and the position you are in your family, amongst your friends, and you saying, God, why am I here? Please trust that there is a reason. And God knows the reason. And because he knows our future, we are right where we need to be. So be still and know that he is God. Yes. Right? Yes. And so, guys, and we might not like it. We might not like it, okay? But that we need to stay put and be where he puts us. And so verse 2 says, so now they're in Jerusalem. They approach King Herod and they say, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him. So, guys, the interesting thing about this is a couple things. They come and they're looking for somebody who was born king. Guys, back in those days, you weren't born king. You were born a prince, right? If anything, if you were born, your father was the king and you were born, you were a prince for some time. And providing your daddy wasn't overthrown or killed, then you might be king. You might be appointed king, but you were a prince for a long time. But Jesus was born king. The good news about it is he didn't have to wait for kingship. He didn't have to wait for status. He was born with it. Okay? So here it is. And then also, the interesting thing is they were looking for King of the Jews. Now, back then, the Jews were despised by pretty much everybody. You know, they were thought to be a lowly, troublesome race. They had gotten conquered so many times by foreign enemies. And so, you know, people, they didn't want to be bothered with the Jews, right? And so the fact that these men would travel so far from the east to worship a baby who was born the King of Jews, you know, so the people was like, what? You know, what is this about the King of the Jews? And it's very ironic because remember when he died, that was what they put over his head. You know, here lies the King of the Jews. Again, guys, you know, this is irony in this. But they didn't know that they was messing with the King of all, right? But you know, and so, you know, they said that they saw his star and they wanted to come to worship him. So they were led by the star that moved to the place that he was revealed. And it could have come from Balaam's prophecy in Numbers 24 that says a star will come from Jacob and a scepter will rise from Israel. All right. Right now, this could be. This is what, you know, scholars think that they may have saw when they saw the star and said, okay, well, this is, you know, this prophecy being fulfilled, so let's go. Verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So now, guys, we know that King Herod was crazy, okay? We knew he was crazy. He was always on the defense because here he is, supposedly the King of the Jews, and he wasn't even Jewish. So that's why he always was on alert, and he was always paranoid that somebody with true kingship or a true heir would try to come and take the throne, right? This man, he even killed some of his own family members who he thought was disloyal to him. This is how paranoid he was, okay? Guys, this lets us know if we somewhere we ain't supposed to be, the enemy will make a fool out of us. We'll hurt so many people that we're not supposed to because we someplace we're not supposed to be. Now, he didn't kill, you know, family members and stuff like that because of his paranoia. And he would kill anybody who threatened the throne. And so, guys, when it talks about all of Jerusalem being disturbed with him, it doesn't give the reason why. One reason we can assume is because they knew he was crazy. And they figured that when he found out about this, what is he going to do? And sure enough, he did go crazy and had all the boys 2 and under killed in Bethlehem, killed in the area. Just because he didn't know where Jesus was, so he said, we're going to figure it out, and eliminated them all, right? So here it is. They're disturbed as well. Verse 4 says, so he assembled all the chief priests and the scribes of the people and asked them where the Messiah would be born. Now, guys, we know that the chief priests and the scribes, those were the religious leaders of the time. Those were the teachers of the law, okay? So they knew about this prophecy. And so, you know, they knew the Bible, but the issue was they didn't apply it, right? They knew, I mean, and especially some of the scribes, and, you know, they knew the Bible or the law word for word, could quote it word for word and teach it, but still not live it or apply it. That's how Jesus got there, and they didn't even know, you know, who he was, okay? So guys, that's a message to us that it's one thing to know the word correctly, but it's more importantly to live it correctly, okay? We don't want to get messed up like they were. Verses 5 and 6. So they come to King Herod, the chief priests and the scribes, and they let him know the prophecy of Micah. They say, in Bethlehem of Judah, they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, and the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel, right? So literally they give King Herod this prophecy, and the sad thing is that they knew it and they chose not to do anything with it. They knew that Jesus, the Messiah, was 5 miles away from them, and they didn't choose to worship him. Right? They sat there and they ignored him. Guys, this lets us know that we have 2 choices when it comes to how we respond to the King. And that's to worship him and accept him, or ignore and reject him. Right? And even if we know the word, especially if we know the word, it's the challenge is really on us to make sure that we're accepting him and responding correctly. Okay? And so this last part, I love this last part. So in Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 through 11, it teaches us how we need to worship the king, how we need to worship this amazing leader that it says that we have. We have a leader that will not fail, a leader that's going to shepherd us with love and care and compassion and patience, right? So now, how do we honor him? So, guys, in verses 7 and 8, it leaves us out of the lesson, but we know that this is where Herod, he calls himself tricking the wise men, and he tells them, oh yeah, y'all go ahead. This is, he's over in Bethlehem. Y'all come back, tell me where he is, because I want to send him some gifts too. Okay, now we know what gift he wanted to send him. But, the wise men, they go on their way. And then here it is, we need to learn to worship like the wise men. Verse 9 says, after hearing the king, they went on their way. And there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. Guys, now a lot of the nativity scenes that we see, it's usually the wise men right there at the birth of Jesus. That's not true, okay? They didn't see him until probably about 2 years later, right? When they first saw the star, it took them probably close to a year to travel to Jerusalem. Right, because it says they came from the east. They were traveling all the way to Jerusalem. And, and when King Herod asked them, how long ago was it that you seen this? Scholars speculate it was close to a year, right? Think about the determination that it took for them to get to the king. Right, we already see the time, and we already know they was walking, okay? And let's not talk about the weather and all of the other trials that they had to face just to get there. But they would not stop in their determination to worship the king, okay? So they made their journey. Nothing stopped them. Guys, we cannot let anything stop us from worshiping the king. Right. It's icy outside, ain't it? Right? We cannot let anything stop us from worshiping the king, right? Yeah. And so the best part about it is, guys, they worshiped him, or they set out to worship him, not because of anything he did, but just because of who he was. We say all the time, God, I worship you because of who you are. Really, that probably ain't the truth, right? We thank you, God, for my car. Thank you for my health, my strength, my this, my that. He hadn't even granted them any of that yet, and they were worshiping him just because he was the king. Just because of who he is. Guys, we have to get in a habit of worshiping him just because of who he is. Verse 10. I love this. It says, when they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Here it is. They have not even met the king yet, but they got excited at the sign of him. They didn't even see his face, and they got excited because they knew he was near. Right? A symbol of his presence made them get excited. Guys, we don't get excited about the symbol of his presence, right? That's the sad part. Sometimes we don't worship till we come to church because we got to see the altar. We got to see Pastor Walker. We got to see the church house to worship. Guys, we don't. Right? There are so many signs in the world. Nature shows who he is. Right? When we feel that cold breeze on our face, we should start worshiping, because that's a sign of his presence. When we see the clouds, the moon, the stars, the sun, we need to start worshiping, because that's a sign of his presence. Right? We have to start getting excited about the signs of his presence. Don't wait till you get to heaven to see his face and worship him. Worship him now. That's right. Right? And then verse 11, this is the proper response when you see a king. It says, they entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. And this is what they did. They fell to their knees, right? A sign of humility, right? And then it says, and they worshiped him. Guys, they didn't just worship him with their mouth. They brought gifts. They brought gifts. I'll let y'all meditate on that one. It says, and so they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Guys, all of these gifts were symbolic of who he was, right? So gold, we know that spoke to his royalty, right? Because that's the most finest and precious metal that they had. And then frankincense, that spoke to his deity, right? His godliness, because that was like a glittery gum that came when you sliced multiple times like a bark of a certain tree. And so they used that for sacrificial offerings, right? That gift spoke to his deity. And then the myrrh spoke to his humanity, right? Because that was a perfume that was mostly used in the embalming process, okay? So guys, when we worship the king, this king that we have that is more than worthy of our praise and our worship. We got to make sure we worship in the right way. We have to make sure that we're worshiping the very signs of his existence. Just from hearing his name, we need to start worshiping, right? And then making sure that when we come to him, we're not coming empty-handed. Now, it don't mean that we might have gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I don't even know where you would find frankincense and myrrh right now, right? But it does mean that, one, I'm bringing him myself as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, right? Which is my reasonable service. I'm bringing myself, but yes, and I'm bringing my tithes, my time, talents, all of those things, right? We just came out of stewardship month not that long ago. We're bringing all of that to him because he deserves it, right? We talked about the because he came from antiquity and the fact that, you know, he gave up glory for us.
Yes, he did.
He loved us so much that he clothed himself in flesh like us, right? To be here, down here with us and to save us so that we can be up there with him, right? So guys, the whole moral of this lesson, it talks about this ruler that cares for us, but we need to make sure that we have the proper response for such a ruler. Amen?
Well done. Well done, teacher. Amen. Amen.